idea of truth can seem very, very arrogant. Women's right to choose, a difficult issue like that. I can disagree with someone. Most of the time I've reached a point where we realise we disagree for the same reason, essentially. We disagree because we both care about women. And that's an interesting question. My faith has always played an important role. Like, I think he may have even called me a git once because I did a speech for school captain and you really feel the emotion of the piece.
Wow.
But that was one of my favourite days. One of the most surreal days of my life. Enthusiastically greeting everyone on the street. That's just what you do. Everyone says hello to you. My authority isn't my own brain, and it's not my own reasoning. Like, Jesus said so many controversial things, but he does so often claim to be speaking the truth. I don't feel wise most of the time, especially when you're having difficult conversations. Oh yeah. Chris, that's such a good question.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. It's so nice to be back in Cambridge, although both my guests and I have been exhausted by Freshers Week and have yet to start any of our readings. My guest and I have not yet had a chance to grab coffee too for the podcast because of her insanely packed schedule. But we did manage to have Jax this afternoon. Coffee's on me next time we meet. So we surpassed 2,500 podcast downloads yesterday. And if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me. I cannot thank the guests enough for their courage and insights. I'm very excited to introduce my guest today, Lucy Williams. Lucy Williams is a third-year student at Homerton College studying education, policy and international development. She loves her subject and finds international development particularly interesting following the few months she spent in the Gambia before uni. She also spends lots of her time getting involved in different societies, including singing with King's Voices and helping on the committee for the Christian Union as Vice President External. Lucy, welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Lucy, how was your meeting for the Christian Union just then?
Yeah, no, it was really good. I think so. We're planning for an events week in February, so put it in your diaries, 6th to the 10th of February. But yeah, just starting with all the sort of practical, exciting stuff now. So
that's
great.
Amazing. And how do you find being back at Cambridge as the third year now?
Yeah, it sounds weird calling myself a third year. I don't feel old enough, but I'm really excited to be back. I think I always feel a bit sad at the end of the summer, but actually it's so nice to see everyone again. And I think the papers this year are looking really interesting for education. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
What are two things that you're looking forward to about your academic year?
Ooh, interesting. I am looking forward to my subject. I think there's a bit more choice for me this year. So I think it will tie in really nicely to things I'm particularly interested in, things I'm interested in doing after uni. And I'm also excited for lots of CU, Christian Union things we've got coming up this term. We've got a carol service at the end, which is always one of my favourites. So I'm excited for that.
That's awesome. I wish I share your enthusiasm about the subject. Mainly because our timetable hasn't even come out yet.
Yeah, the faculty are being a little slow.
I do remember before coming to Cambridge, kind of seeing on like LinkedIn, for example, that some people say like they're finalists in the subject, and my first impression was, wow, like what finals are they in? Like I thought they were one of the best in their subjects, but now we are also well and truly finalists.
We've joined the club.
Yep, absolutely. We both study education and we're on the same track, so there is a lot to talk about there, and I know that we've had a lot of discussions about, people who have had a very positive impact on our life, and I do want to learn more about your childhood and all the interesting experiences you've had, but maybe I'll start off with, can you tell me about your singing teacher, Chris?
Oh, yeah. Chris? Well, Chris was my singing teacher.
I don't know Chris, but... Yeah.
You found out about him. He's He now lives in Northumberland, but he used to live in the village just next door to me. And my violin teacher was the first one who said, "Oh, maybe you should think about having singing lessons." So,
how old were you then?
I think I was year 6 when I started singing, but I didn't start lessons with Chris till the following year. And yeah, he really shaped a lot of my singing, actually. I had him for 7 years or something, and so it's quite a personal... I think all private music tuition is quite personal, but particularly singing is very personal because you are your instrument in many ways. So, yeah, I think I always felt comfortable with him as a teacher. He was, and he essentially taught me most of the things I know. So, yeah, really grateful to him.
That's wonderful. I mean, I also did a lot of music growing up, and with piano, trombone, euphonium, and I definitely understand what you say about both the instrument being so important to you, but that relationship with the teacher, because they really get to see you on a weekly basis, and they get to see your developments. So you did violin to start?
Yes, I did violin. I think from maybe about year 2, so I don't know how old that would be, but quite early on. I don't think it sounded very nice for a long time, but my violin teacher was really lovely and sort of also coupled as a therapist for me, probably. She's just one of those people that can be friends with anyone. So
did you stop violin then once you started singing?
No, I didn't. I carried on through to the end of secondary school. But I haven't played as much since coming to uni, sadly. I dabble in the Homerton Orchestra because sometimes we get a free formal out of that.
Good motivation.
Yeah, it is good fun.
So starting violin at year 2, I would assume at that point your parents would have had a big impact on you pursuing music, or were you also like just passionate about it?
No, I think probably my parents had quite a big impact on music in my life. I actually started very first with piano, but I don't tell many people I play the piano because I'm not very good.
You've got to listen to the podcast to find out this information.
The secret things. No, so both my parents play the violin, actually, and they actually met at university in the orchestra. Neither of them were very good, so they sat at the back of the seconds and chatted. But they both played, and I don't know why I picked up the violin, but I did really enjoy it, and I think it did suit me as well. I think often singers also play a string instrument like violin, I found.
So have you done many performances where you're playing the violin or piano but also singing?
Not many. I think I may have in my year 6 leavers assembly been playing the violin and sung in the same sort of time, but they sort of took slightly separate fields, to be honest.
Don't know if you watch Tom and Jerry, but
yeah.
one of the scenes that I used to really love is when, Tom or Jerry plays like multiple instruments at the same time, and they'll play piano with their toes.
I'm not that talented, I'm afraid. Not as talented as Tom and Jerry. But yeah.
That's awesome. And where did you grow up, Lucy?
I grew up not far from Cambridge, in Hertfordshire kind of area. My village that I went to primary school was called Kimpton, but my house is pretty close to Luton Airport, if you've ever flown from there.
No, I haven't, but what's the kind of culture there, if any?
Yeah, it's probably quite typical of southern English culture. There's a lot of commuters to London where I'm from, so quite a lot of people who've got enough to move out of London and live in the countryside and send their kids to a nice village school or whatever, but then go into the city to work. So there's quite a lot of commuter towns.
Interesting.
But yeah, I loved where I grew up, and particularly the village of Kimpton had such a warm community. Yeah, it was a really lovely place to grow up.
That's wonderful. And had you moved houses anywhere?
I've never moved house. I was born in the house that I still go back to in the holidays. So yeah, I think that was something I was always scared my parents would move, because I just loved home, and I can't really imagine anywhere else being home.
Did your parents grow up there then?
No, my mum's parents are Estonian. and they moved over in the Second World War, but she grew up in Southend, sort of Essex area. And then my dad grew up generally around Reading, Basingstoke kind of area, but he went to boarding school.
We both, again, study education, so what were your schools like?
My school, so my primary school was a village school, so I think one of the things I really appreciated about it was that everyone went to that school. You know, there are people in my class who have gone to Cambridge, there are people in my class who are, you know, working already, there are people who got 2 kids, so like it was such a mix where I got to meet people that I might not have met otherwise. And I never went to a private school or a single sex school, and I think I quite liked the variety that gave me. My secondary school was a bit of an unusual school. It was a non-denominational Christian day and boarding school that was trying to pretend to be a private school in many ways. I absolutely loved it there. We played lacrosse and rugby, which is why I say we pretended to be a private school. The only state school to play lacrosse in the UK. And there were some students that boarded, but that was generally because they were international students. Most people were day pupils.
Can I just clarify, what does a village school mean? Is that when there's only that one school in the village? And everyone goes
it's just that there's only one school, so it's quite an old school as well, because that's where all the people from the village just used to go. So
well, it does take a village to
raise a child. Very good.
When you think back to yourself in primary school, obviously you'd be quite different, but do you remember any of the kind of report card comments? Like, what did your teachers describe you as?
Oh, interesting. I do remember, I was looking back over some of these for my coursework in first year, and I think I was quite enthusiastic. I think maybe the word like diligent, or sort of I basically tried hard. I didn't always succeed, but I think I've always been a bit of a trier, a bit of a keen kid. And yeah, I think a mix. Some people thought I was quite chatty, some people thought I was reserved, so that's probably still true now. But yeah, I think generally I was always quite determined and tried hard, and that's probably what would come out from my
And where do you think you got those traits from?
Probably a lot of that was from my parents, I imagine. I think they have quite a strong work ethic, and but also just have always delighted in me and my brother. When we've, whatever we're interested in, they would foster that. So
do you feel like, the parents' work ethic, and obviously our parents play a massive part in what we think is right or what we think is normal, and I guess what I want to hear from your perspective is it that they reinforce through words a lot of these values, or do you think it's the example that they set? And I guess it would be a combination of both, but do you have any like anecdotes or significant moments that you can think back on? It's like, wow, that's when they really show this, and I really admire that about them.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm struggling to think of an exact moment. I know my mum is just a real enthusiast. So I think one of her gifts is that she's just delights in other people doing well, and is good at praising people for things that they really are good at. It's not, it's not fake praise where it's kind of everyone gets praise, but she'll see what's valuable and recognise that, and genuinely does feel really pleased for others. So that probably played a part. I think my parents worked part-time so that they could look after us, and they're both GPs, and so I think we've just always seen them work hard. Maybe that's something that just filters through in like subconsciously, I don't know. So I can't think of a like precise moment, but
if they're GPs, they definitely need to make sure that they don't praise everyone. Well, oh, you're well. You're
just
very
send
healthy.
them home without any medication.
Yeah. So GP, very interesting. I mean, in Chinese culture, like medicine and education are, I guess, two of the historically most noble professions because they are about, curing bodies and educating minds and both having a very direct contribution to society and to other people and to the community. And I think I've told you before, Lucy, that before I came to Cambridge, I had an offer to study medicine in Australia. And it was a real toss-up, and lots of people asked me, well, they are so distinct.
Yeah.
And I guess they are in terms of the actual content and what you actually do. But to me, I've always seen both of them as a means of achieving like a positive impact. And I know you're quite involved in the Christian Union. You've played a big part in like the International Development Society here. And generally, I think I'm not alone in saying that you have a strong desire to make an impact and make a difference. So I guess you've mentioned your parents as one source of inspiration for the good values, but were there involvements in your primary school years or secondary school years that really inspired you?
It's difficult to know where your values come from. I think I definitely would. I couldn't answer that without saying that my faith has always played an important role, and I also think things like music have played a role because it's hard. You have to practice is boring or difficult, and I think keeping going with that sort of teaches you actually when you work hard at something, it is rewarding in the longer term. And sometimes you have to put in what feels like a lot of work and you can't see where you're getting with it, but actually it sort of pays off in the longer run. So probably those two things of maybe, I guess, practically experiencing, this is how we make a difference. But I think in terms of my worldview and my values, and that's probably quite heavily influenced by my faith as well.
And were you always Christian? Did you grow up in a Christian family?
Yeah, so both my parents are Christians. My dad became a Christian at school and my mum at university. And so I've always grown up with, hearing from the Bible with their kind of influence and teaching. And it's something that definitely is a personal thing that is my own choice. But it's also something I am not sure I can't identify a time where I didn't, a kind of age-appropriate way, think this is something that I believe, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I guess one of the best things I find about religion in general is the community base, but also it's the reminder that there is a world bigger to ourselves. I think most of us go through our days obsessing over our life, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way because we do think about things through our lens, but when I'm at a church, even when I'm in school and I'm in chapel and singing, it reminds me that there is a wider community and perhaps a higher order being, but we are not the centre of the universe.
Yeah, I think Christianity beautifully brings the individual, and I think we all have this sense of, as individuals, we are hugely significant, but also we're part of a universe that is so much bigger than us, and there's kind of significance and insignificance at the same time. And actually I think there's the community of the church gives you that. I'm not sure if
insignificant is the right word, but I think it's like you're significant even though you're small. You're small even though you're significant.
Probably a better word, because it's like why do we feel so significant when actually there are billions of galaxies? That is like a slightly baffling thing about human nature, I think.
My school was quite known. So it was an Anglican school, and it was quite known for servant leadership. So our school motto was for God and country, and we always interpret that as service, and therefore community service was a big thing. Volunteering your time, your energy, your creativity to contributing to those perhaps not as fortunate as we were. Did you get up to many community activities during your schooling years?
Community activities. Well, one thing, a big village community event played quite a significant role in my calendar for the first few years of my life was the May Festival at Kimpton, which isn't, I'm not sure it's community service, but it's just this, at the 1st of May and over the bank holiday, the whole village comes together and there's this big parade and there's a festival on the green and there's like dancing and there's an entertainment evening. And I don't think many, as sort of urban growth continues, I think that sort of aspect of a village community is less common now. And that was like a beautiful way just to see people come together and celebrate. In terms of community service, probably things I've done through church, maybe. We used to do something called Coffee Stop every Saturday, where people could just come in for free tea and coffee and a chat.
So they come, grab coffee, record a podcast episode, and leave.
The podcast bit maybe wasn't included. But just a space for people to come and talk. And I mean, I wasn't heavily involved in all of these things, but we used to visit a local care home, and those sorts of things I think are really important. Yeah.
Were your friends also like-minded in that regard? Because, I mean, from what I know about you and all our chats in the past year, and even now as listeners can probably find out themselves, that you really have an awareness for other people and just something bigger. Or was that very much shared amongst your friendship group at the time?
In primary school, I essentially had one best friend that we were just like glue. So, like, everyone used to get us mixed up because we did so much together. And
doing what?
We just did everything together. Like at school, after school, yeah. So we were just, I think it's all started in nursery, and I offered to open her milk carton or something like that, and we just happened to be really similar people and have quite similar values. We both had older brothers, we both liked music, and it was just, I just made a very good random choice.
What's her name?
Her name's Polly.
Yep.
And yeah, she's just finished studying at Durham. But yeah, through primary school we were like twins, basically. And in terms of, I think probably Christian friends, probably towards more secondary school age, I started to really feel an affinity for Christians my age. Whereas when you're a bit younger, you kind of go to Sunday school and you're just doing your own thing. Yeah, but I think, towards the second half of primary school and secondary school, I made some just deeper friendships with other Christians, because I think there's a unity when you share something so profound in your life with other Christians, that they just feel like family, even if you don't know them that well. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And do you still talk with Polly at all?
Yeah, we obviously we're not doing everything together like we were when we were 7, but I always catch up with her in the holidays, and we've ended up doing quite similar things. She studied social anthropology and at Durham, and all of her kind of academic interests are quite overlap in some ways with what I've been doing as well.
Well, I'm sure if she hears this episode, she would have many great memories of sharing those moments with you, and those friendships that we have early on are very precious.
Yeah, I think they really are.
We'll never be 7-years again, nothing around the playground.
No, we won't.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. You're making me a bit emotional thinking about my time in primary school and all the friends who I hung out with a lot. I know you listened to Mike Hood's episode. And one of the things that Mike's parents did, as you might remember, was that they wrote every good question that he asked, which I thought was really innovative and would have undoubtedly played a role in encouraging him to be inquisitive and to be curious. Did your parents or teachers, mentors, church leaders, coaches, or community leaders do anything that you feel like contributed to your character?
I mean, definitely. I'm just trying to think of some good examples. I think my mum was quite good at, like, helping us with our curiosity to learn and just enjoyment. We used to do something like we'd go, actually, but with both my parents, we'd go to the Natural History Museum, and she'd ask us really good questions, and we'd have to go and find something, or we'd have to do the directions on the tube, and just like ways of like teaching us that weren't sort of just school-based learning, and just were a lot of fun. And so I think that was definitely helpful for sort of curiosity and just enjoying learning about the world. I think probably music teachers taught me to come out of myself a bit. I remember one of my teachers, it might actually be my current teacher, said, I can tell from the way that you're singing this that you really feel the emotion of the piece,
wow.
but you can't see it in your face, because I tend to just have a very like plain expression. But he could tell, like, he knew me well enough to know that, like, musically I understood, and it did mean a lot to me. And so kind of trying to bring out the performance side of singing, because I really like singing, but I think performance wasn't something that probably came naturally to me, and I've sort of grown into a bit more as I've had a bit more practice. And I think some of my secondary school teachers, particularly my head of house, maybe a teacher called Mr. Robertson, who taught me geography, I think he just was quite good. He was very good at noticing ways that people's like were unique or had tried really hard. And I think towards the end of primary school, I kind of just flew under the radar a bit in the mix of quite a chaotic class, to be honest. And the teachers are stressed about SATs and all this stuff. But I think in secondary school, there were some teachers that really saw some of my talents or interests and were just encouraging in that regard. And yeah, he was a bit like unorthodox. He used to say like rude things that were actually a compliment. Like, I think he may have even called me a git once, because I did a speech for school captain and he thought it was really good. So then he was like, he said that he was cross with me because if I was school captain, I couldn't be the house captain. So yeah, he was very good like that, just seeing people's individuality and recognising that. But, yeah.
That's really beautiful. I think actually one of the easiest but most powerful ways to pay forward all that we've received is actually just to reflect upon all the people who have helped us, like our old teachers, and actually go back to them years later and say thank you with a very specific example, anecdote of how they have changed you. Because it's especially powerful when the kids are naughty or not well behaved, which is not the case in your example. I'm sure you were always very well behaved, but when that happens, and I've had many chats with teachers, it reminds them that when they're educating, it's a long-term game. When you help someone, you may not see the effect immediately. The kids could still rebel. They may not even improve their academics. They may not seem like they respect you, but years down the track, all of those tough love, support actually does make a difference. And for me, going back home this summer was very powerful because, you know, having spent a year in Cambridge and going back and seeing my old teachers and coaches, and instantly those memories, some are, you know, tough memories of like all the suicide runnings that we did and all the boot camps that we've done. But in retrospect, they were brilliant. And conversely, seeing some of the kids who I used to mentor and help out, and you know, they're much taller physically, but the fact that they still remember things, which I think is one of the most beautiful things of life, is the relationships that we build. And I guess leading on to that, I would love to talk a bit about crosslinks.
Oh, yeah.
You spent 5 months in the Gambia, but before we talk about the actual 5 months, I read that you needed to fundraise for that to happen.
Yes. I did have to fundraise, and it actually didn't end up being 5 months.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic, it became 3 months.
Okay.
But it would have been 5 months, and we fundraised for 5 months. So, I mean, one of the things was I got a job at Waitrose doing. I was putting the yellow reductions labels on items that were going out of date, and I learned a lot doing that. Actually, I think anything in customer service teaches you a lot. And I also put on a concert around Christmas time to kind of where people could give donations at the end. So it was nice for me because it was a sort of recital to finish off my
with Chris
school
as
years.
well.
Yeah, and to conclude that time with that he taught me. But also, yeah, people were generous in giving donations to me as well.
You're very smart, understanding human nature, that people love free food. And that's how you got me
Oh,
to...
yes.
You and Karis got me to Big Questions.
Oh, yeah, the first time was all just the lunch.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what was your team leaders, Ed and Sarah, like?
Oh, they are such lovely human beings. I saw them not that long ago. They're definitely wise beyond their years. I think I used to treat them like they were, very mature adults when actually they'd only just finished clinical school, 26, and then they had to lead a team of 18-year-olds in a country that Sarah hadn't been to before. Ed did his medical elective there. So, yeah, I have so much respect for them. They're very, very humble people, very wise people, and they were very good at, leading our team and looking after us, and
That's
we had a great time.
That's wonderful. I had a look through the Gambia Gap Year Team Instagram account, and one of my favourite posts there was actually you guys attending that wedding.
Oh, that was one of my favourite days. One of the most surreal days of my life, for sure. But
So,
one of my favourite.
I'm sure there's a lot you can say about it, but maybe like it would have revealed a lot of cultural differences, but yet our common humanity on things like love and respect, and I don't know, like, can you think back to that moment? Like, what did that wedding look like, sound like, smell like, or
It was a very weird
feel
day. So we had to get a taxi to this place. So the wedding was the son of the head teacher so we were helping in schools. So one of our, I think it was Tom's school that he was helping in, the head teacher invited him to her son's wedding and invited all of us. So we were quite excited to go to a Gambian wedding because it's not something we'd experienced before. So we've been picked up by 2 people from the school, and we quickly realised we actually didn't have enough seats in the car. So one car, I was in a car with my friend Bobby, was lying across 3 of us below the level of the windows. So like 4 of us in the spare seats, and then he was just on top, I guess, just chilling. So we made it, and we thought we'd had a bit of a hairy journey, and we were trying to make sure there weren't any police like looking at the fact that there were maybe a few too many people. I mean, I don't think they would have minded that we weren't all wearing our seatbelts or anything, because cars were quite different. But the other car, it turns out, the guy that came to pick them up clearly had not passed his driving test or really knew how to drive. So they had also had a very stressful journey there. But once we were there, we were so welcomed, even though we only knew maybe 1 or 2 people there. And because the Gambia is 90% Muslim, so the wedding actually happens at 5 o'clock, or at least this wedding did. I don't know enough to know if that's always the case, but they had the wedding at 5 o'clock in the mosque, but we were invited like hours before this just to the house of the son, and we went in. It was quite dark inside, sort of like there were lots of like sofas, and they always wanted to give us like the nicest seat, and then they had these big pots of it was something like jollof rice, in that like there was meat in the rice and vegetables in the rice, and so they just gave us a big pan, and they were just like, oh, just scrunch up some rice and eat it. So you kind of make a little you just grab a handful and then you sort of roll it into a ball and then you eat it. So we were kind of going, oh, we were probably told not really to like, you know, eat things with our hands and from our, you know, our health and safety advice, but we just kind of wanted to be polite, so we just mucked in, and it was really lovely. And there was a lot of like weird foods I'd never tried before. This stuff called like it was like sort of sour milk and couscous with banana flavouring. It was like, and it was sort of like almost like a little party bag at the end. It was very weird. And then most of what we were doing was just like, there was dancing. So it was this kind of tribal ritual where people would dance and then they'd like give money to like some of the older women. I didn't quite understand it or get to the bottom of it, but they invited us all to dance one by one, and it was a source of much hilarity, but I think probably more for the locals trying to see us attempt their dancing. But they were so welcoming to us. It was astonishing that they were just so keen to have us and very kind to us, and we just had a lot of fun. It was a very weird day, but it was really fun.
I guess you say weird because you're not used to it, and it's quite an unfamiliar way of doing things. And it reminded me, actually, I caught up with Karis the other day, and obviously she spent her time in Tanzania volunteering, going mad. She was saying how when they arrive, like they would call like white people.
Yeah, I can't remember what's the word they used to call us.
And I guess it's about differences, and you know, you clearly notice the difference, but do you feel like those differences were a barrier to understanding, or did they lead to more curiosity or empathy?
Yeah, I think any difference can be a barrier to understanding. And I mean, I say weird. It was only weird because we didn't know what to expect, and lots of things happened that day that we just didn't know were going to happen. But generally, I think it's just a very humbling experience to live in another culture. And I think it was so valuable to just see totally different value systems lived out, and to be the one who feels like the outsider, and to recognise that a Western way isn't a right way. And I think particularly more community-based living, people have a very different attitude to time, but it's much more about being in the present moment and respecting the people that you're with, rather than kind of always planning for the next thing. And that's something I miss. I remember when I came back, I was enthusiastically greeting everyone on the street. That's just what you do. Everyone says hello to you, regardless of whether you know them. Whereas in the UK, it's much more normal to pretend that you like ignore everyone else around you, and even if you see someone you know, you might ignore them because you don't have enough time to speak to them. So it's just different ways of doing things, but at the same time, we're all humans, and there's so much we share as well. But it definitely taught me a lot. I definitely learnt a lot more by going than anyone would have possibly learnt from us.
Yeah, this sense of humility that arises from being outsider, being other, and experiencing a different value system. I certainly feel that being an international student and being from China as well, speaking a different language at home is very fascinating, and is I guess one of the things I almost actively seek out at this age, and definitely for the next decade in my 20s. I would love to be challenged on my assumptions, because I feel like it's just a enriching way to live in the long run, and it sounds like you value that as well. I still want to hear a bit more about that gap year, but instead of asking you a specific question, I'm going to give you a prompt.
Okay.
And I know you have heard this before, but I think it's in chapter 7, verse 7. Is that how I say it?
Might be Matthew chapter 7, and then the verses would be the...
Okay, so Jesus once said, "Ask and it will be given to you. seek and you will find.
Mm-hmm.
Knock and the door will be open to you.
Mm-hmm. And in relation to my gap year, oh, fantastic. Well, I think, yeah, Jesus is talking about prayer here, and I guess just the fact that we can come to God and ask for provision from him as a father, and I think I saw that more profoundly in my gap year than at any other time of my life. Partly that just the experience of doing it was just a series of people suggesting it to me or certain doors opening, but actually particularly from the Gambian Christians that we met, they rely so much more on prayer for daily needs. Like, if you know the Lord's Prayer, which is quite common in the Christian church, it says, "Give us today our daily bread," which isn't something that we tend to have to do very much because we feel...
so do you mean that they were taking it more literally, like it is actually receiving the bread, whereas we think about it more figuratively?
Well, I guess that prayer is a prayer for provision, which is, I guess, literal, and the language of bread was probably just more culturally significant as that is the thing you need to survive. But in the Gambia, that was probably more true as well. Like, there's this stuff called tapalapa, which you can buy on any street corner. It's a kind of like dense baguette type bread. And I remember one of the people speaking to called Pastor Sang, they had a church community lunch thing, and they didn't have enough food and they didn't have the money to buy it. So they prayed, and I think within 20 minutes, this motorbike tapalapa delivery man turned up and just said, "I have all this bread and I need to get rid of it." And stories like that where I think we never ask because, I think it's less common for Christians in somewhere like the UK to ask for the very basic things in life, like food. Because
Liz Truss will be trying to change that.
And maybe we will have to do so more, or realise that actually everything is... There's a verse I love in James that says, every good and perfect gift is from above, from the Father of heavenly lights, who doesn't change, essentially. And God is faithful, but actually the idea that God is the one that is in control and providing for everything we need, I think is really radical. But I saw it lived out in the faith of the Gambian Christians, where they said, "You may not do this, but we pray for our water and we pray for our food." And like the water system in the house we were staying in was an absolute nightmare, and it kept breaking. And so we did pray for it to be fixed, and we saw prayers answered. And that doesn't mean that we didn't call a plumber, but I think if you never ask, then you are never able to thank the person that gave it to you. If you see what I mean, then. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that I took away from that year.
Sounds like a very character-shaping experience, to say the least.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, for example, if you want to be a mother, I'm just assuming you do have kids, would you also want them to have a gap year like that in a totally foreign, challenging environment?
I don't know. I think I would recommend it to anyone. I don't think if it was my own kids, I don't think I'd force them to do it. But I think it would give me a more positive perspective on something like that. I think you have to be discerning about the organisation you're going with, where you're going to, and I think one of the things that makes the biggest difference is your team. And we got along so well. That was one of the biggest joys of it, was just living with 10 friends all the time. But yeah, I think I would probably advocate for a similar experience. If people had the opportunity to do something similar, I think I would encourage it, because I learned so much, and it was really great.
Would it be right to assume that experience inspires you in the Cambridge University International Development Society, and I noticed that you were doing like the Dry January Challenge, for example.
Oh yeah, I think I sort of got involved in that because there was a role open for artistic director, and that was something I'd done a little bit at A level, but also international development is something that I am very interested in. I think just a lot of that is just, I think I've always felt just sad at the inequality in the world, and
just sad or overwhelmed as well.
I think there's often a sense in which this is too big a problem to easily solve, and there's so much history that's led up to why there's such inequality, but also I think humility is important again in like what's actually a problem and how can we help in a way that's is right and is good. I think just because I think humans have an incredible dignity and worth, to see people suffer, I think for any of us should be something that is overwhelming, but I think we often find ways of kind of limiting our experience of that pain because we can't carry the world's weight on our shoulders. But yeah.
On that note about difficulty and the weight on our shoulders, I mean, we were talking before the podcast about controversy and difficult matters, and I guess it ties well with faith and how you conceptualize a framework for decision making, and I kind of just want to know a bit about how you approach difficult subjects such as poverty, such as women's right to choose, which are very polarized in these modern society, and again, I know that we're all learning and evolving our views, but how do you actually go about dissecting these issues before coming to your own personal opinion?
Yeah, I think it's increasingly difficult to say that there is like a truth or a right or wrong in our culture, I think, because that's the idea of truth can seem very, very arrogant, and I wouldn't want to say I have the truth, which is why my authority isn't my own brain and it's not my own reasoning, primarily. But I think I come to the Bible because I believe that God is creator, and so I think that's the foundation of what I seek in kind of discerning what I think is the right way to live, or the right policies even, or any of my things essentially come back to the Bible, because the Bible says that it is God's word revealed to us, and obviously like there's you can take the historical angle of these are historical texts, but what it claims to be is inspired by God, and if he's the creator, he knows a lot more than I do, and he knows me better than I know myself, and he knows each one of us. So I guess I want to trust the words of Jesus, really. We were saying this the other day, that Jesus so often says, very truly, I tell you, which is a very controversial thing. Like, Jesus said so many controversial things, but he does so often claim to be speaking the truth, and I think I want to listen to his truth because I believe he has authority rather than my own. And sometimes that means I hold positions which do put me in a place where I feel very much a minority, and I feel probably misunderstood most of the time. But when I'm talking with people, so that's probably how I decide my own perspective on particularly difficult issues. But when I'm talking with others, I think I'll often try to find what we have in common. Something like women's right to choose, a difficult issue like that. I can disagree with someone, but if we have a conversation where they're willing to listen, I'm willing to listen, I think most of the time I've reached a point where we realise we disagree for the same reason, essentially. We disagree because we both care about women, and we both care about life, and we both care about well-being, and we believe people matter, and we believe that people need freedom, and all those things. Actually, we both agree on that, but because of other parts of our worldview and foundations, we've come to very different conclusions on an issue like medical ethics. But I think coming back to like, actually, we both care for people here, and we both think human dignity is incredibly important. Is helpful to be able to keep conversations in good faith rather than just arguing. That's probably what I'd say.
Wow, that's very well put, very articulate and very wise.
Thank you. I don't feel wise most of the time, especially when you're having difficult conversations. I think you can say things you think, oh, why did I say that? But
yeah, I think being the minority and recognising it while also being open-minded to listen and to debate is quite courageous. And I think in our modern world, with the soundbite media, social media, instant gratification, it's easy to take things out of context. It's easy to, with cancel culture, to label, shame, and it's also easy to confuse confidence with competence, for example, just because someone is articulating something very eloquently doesn't necessarily mean they are right, and just because they're the loudest doesn't mean they should be heard the most.
Yeah.
And we see in politics, for example, like preaching to the converted, like all the politicians are speaking to their crowd. So after every sentence, there's a loud roaring cheer. And
so true.
I guess it's a hard one, but have you consciously put yourself, or have an example of you putting yourself in a different environment, such as at the Gambia where you said you were the other, that you've changed your mind on a particular viewpoint, an issue, a topic?
Yeah, changing your mind is hard. It's really hard to admit you're wrong, I think, and to change your opinion. I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know. I think any conversation can... I definitely don't hold all the same views I used to hold. But at the same time, I think probably your teenage years are quite formative anyway. But I do really appreciate having conversations with other people that I disagree with, because it just gives you this awareness that, not everyone is thinking the same thing. And I was saying this to someone on Thursday, like sometimes I just wonder, maybe I just think what I think because everyone around me is agreeing with me and that sort of thing.
The echo chamber.
But I think I'm quite I do think I think about that a lot, and I like to listen to podcasts and that sort of thing. There's a podcast called The Sacred, which is a lady who's a Christian, but she interviews many, many different people about all sorts of different things, and they're often to do with their professions and their reaction to Christianity as well, which I think I found that really helpful to hear other voices, and I like to talk to people who aren't Christians and to hear what they think of us, and or another issue was like, I'm trying to think of something else that I am. But yeah, I do enjoy talking to people that I don't agree with, because it's just unearths blind spots, I think. But it's not easy to
it's very difficult
to change your mind.
We all love ourselves sometimes a bit too much.
I think so. Yeah, it is hard to change your mind. I think one of the things I loved was REA level, because is that religious education? It was religious education, and I think ours was philosophy, ethics, and Christian thought. And most of my class I was maybe like the extreme one or the weird one or whatever, but I loved those conversations of just people that I would never normally get to talk with below a surface level. We'd have all sorts of debates about like big and important issues, and I really, really enjoyed that. So I think it's just something I do quite enjoy, hearing lots of perspectives on an issue, to kind of try and make an informed choice.
In Australia, our religious education was called RAVE, R-A-V-E, Religious and Values Education.
Interesting.
And as you can imagine, it was far easier to talk about values, which is so broad. And, you know, the teachers who get assigned to teach RAVE are just because they have to. And in our classes, we were just watching things like The Matrix and Mrs. Doubtfire.
I watched The Matrix in my class. I think that's so good, though, because actually... religions are just value systems.
You think? Is that how you would define it?
As in, I would say that secularism isn't the default. I think often we think what is neutral is atheism, but that's a very modern Western idea, I guess I would say. Like, the history of humanity is generally believed in some sort of theistic or spiritual belief. And so we're kind of the anomaly in the West of being sort of seeing the default as actually there is no spiritual or that sort of thing. But I think it's helpful to frame, because we all have values, and I think if we put it in the same framework of like, actually we've all got a worldview, so let's discuss it all, rather than thinking, oh, this one is just, this is the right one and all the other ones are somehow exotic.
Well, as a STAR education policy student and devout Christian, how what role should religion play in school curriculums?
Oh, interesting. I did write an essay on this once. Well, I don't know if it was that exact question. Yeah, it's a good question, because it maybe is bizarre that like Christianity is sort of foregrounded as like the dominant religion that people learn about. And I think perhaps there's been a move towards more comparative religion at GCSE now, which I think is a good thing, to be able to look at lots of worldviews. But I think what you were saying about having religious and values education is actually really important, because I don't think we should just be learning about other religions. I think we should be learning to analyse our own value systems. I think that comes under the same topic, really. Like, what do I believe and why do I believe it? I think one of the reasons I enjoyed RE A-levels, that it really got me to question everything I believed. And I needed to have not just like a personal answer, but also an academic answer and a logical answer. And so I think we should all be doing that. It's very Socratic, maybe, but the unexamined life is not worth living. But I do think we should all like think about, why do I think that? Why do I believe what I believe? I think it's a good question.
We've come a long way since that Mino's paradox.
Oh gosh, don't take me back there. I actually came to really enjoy that topic, but well, I'm not sure most of the education.
This is another time you're in the minority.
For sure.
I'm sure we can talk about these big questions all day on a Friday, especially.
Yeah, come along to Big Questions next Friday. In fact, we are doing one on next week's one is about our religions all just the same, and it's a Christian who was formerly a Zoroastrian priest. So
I've got some rapid fire questions to end, but before then, I've just got one more question.
Okay.
Personal curiosity. You know, when I think about that morning lecture that we had, and then I was in Homerton doing my essay, both you and Karos came along and said, well, there's big questions on free food, would you like to go? I said, well, I've got this neoliberalism essay that I need to write. And then 5 minutes later, you guys came back again and go, well, why don't you come along to big question, free food? This is just one example of the inclusivity or the initiative you guys show to invite all sorts of people to go to the Christian Union. What is the motivation of asking people to go?
That's such a good question. I guess we just believe that, like, the gospel, you hear the word gospel, it just means good news, and we believe Jesus is the best news in the whole world. Like, he's changed my life, and I've seen the way he's changed other people's lives, and I can't imagine living without Jesus in my life. I think I'd be thoroughly depressed, or I'd never think about existential issues at all because I'd be scared of the answers. And I think it just gives me, there's so much I learn, and I learn that actually I'm not at the centre of the universe, but actually I am deeply significant, and so is everyone else around me. And it gives me this framework that really helps me understand the world, but ultimately it gives me life. And I think we all just feel so passionately about it that it's like if you had the cure for cancer, or you believe, like, you've spent your whole life making the cure for cancer or whatever, and you finally got it, you wouldn't just keep it to yourself and never make a vaccine, or never like distribute it. You think,
make a patent first.
Make a patent so you can make lots of money. But Christianity is it's like that. Like, we genuinely believe that people need to hear it, and it will be the best thing they can ever hear. And so I guess we think it'd be selfish to keep it to ourselves, and that's very unpopular. And the idea of proselytizing evangelism, it's not what people want to hear, and we're not here to force anyone to think anything, but we do think everyone deserves the opportunity to hear, so that they can make their own decision about whether they believe that it's true, whether they believe Jesus was who he said he was, because he's changed our lives, and we'd love to see the same for others. So that's what I'd honestly say. But I think, people might disagree with that, but we do believe that it's the best news in the world.
Favourite singer?
Favourite singer? Ooh.
These are rapid fire questions.
Gosh, sorry. Well, if I was thinking classically, one of my favourite singers... Oh, this is so difficult. Sorry, I'm really bad at short decision making. Favourites, classically, I'd maybe say someone like Joyce DiDonato, if it was just stuff I like to listen to.
The country you haven't yet visited but would most like to?
New Zealand.
Oh, should have said Australia.
I've already visited
Australia.
Okay.
If you weren't studying education, what other Cambridge degree would you be doing?
Geography.
Favourite fruit?
Ooh, probably strawberries.
One person who you would like to have a 1 hour chat with, alive or dead?
Ooh, the Queen.
And final rapid fire question would be, what's your dream? Or actually, not a rapid fire question, but when people hear Lucy Williams, what words would you like them to think of?
Oh gosh. Well, what I'd like them to think of would probably be very different to what they actually said. I'd love people to think I was kind and wise, and those are pretty good. Generous. I mean, I'd also love people to think I'm like clever and cool, but I'm just not those things. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely not. Yeah. Anyway, people can make their own mind up.
I also think courageous. I'm not sure if you thought much about, like, even for you to do this podcast is quite a courageous thing to do. It's never easy to reveal parts of ourselves, especially unpopular opinions.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll get some social media hate now.
No, but so I mean, I'm starting this academic year. I'm obviously hoping to continue to do the podcast. Who do you think should be on it? Who would you nominate on the spot?
Who would I nominate on the spot? Well, I know
a lot of people are quite shy, you know.
Yeah. But you asked Peter already.
Peter's doing it, yeah.
But I think he'd be fun. Do they have to be students? Well, I've not really thought about this. It is really interesting. From the education faculty, I've had a lot of supervisions with Inez. Do you know Inez?
Mm-hmm.
And she's, I feel like my mind has been expanded from sharing supervisions with her. So she'd probably be really interesting. She does a lot of really cool stuff, and has some really interesting things to say.
Great. We'll make sure you do nominate her on my new nomination form. But
will do.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Have you found this to be a interesting experience?
It has. I do feel like, I don't know what I've shared. I can't remember half the stuff I said, but it has been really, I have really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Good. Well, best of luck for the Freshers event tonight.
Yes.
And thank you for always challenging us. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for being cool as well. And I look forward to seeing you around a bit more in education, and also at perhaps some big questions and CU events this term.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure.